Howard's holding it down for all of HBCU women's track and field. Because of the 5 female athletes who have punched their ticket to track and field nationals, every single one is a Bison. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Now, we'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the newest HBCU gymnastics team out there at Wilberforce, and that makes 3 in the last 4 years. Prior to that, FAMU women's basketball is bringing in a former All-MAC freshman team player, but she has a little bit of a history that I really want to dive into in segment 2. And we kick off today's episode with Howard holding it down for all of HBCU women's track and field, because every single one of the athletes who have been invited, or I shouldn't say invited, I should say qualified, because it's not like, oh, we like Ayana Gray Williams. No, Ayana Gray Williams is a part of that 4x1 relay who has punched their ticket, who has ran fast enough to qualify to make it into Eugene for the NCAA track and field nationals. Today's episode is all for the ladies, right? Because we're going track and field, women's track and field, then we're going women's basketball, and then we're going with gymnastics. So this is some fun, right? This is like an old school. I love this one. It's like kind of an old school segment where I just kind of do a theme. I feel like I haven't done a theme episode in a long time, so it feels good to be able to do a theme for today. I didn't get a chance to focus on every single athlete who has punched their ticket into the track and field nationals. I just haven't had an opportunity to do that. On Monday, we primarily focused on Jamarion Stubbs and the North Carolina A&T athletes. I'm sure we'll get back to both of those entities, specifically the NCAT relay. I feel like there was some meat left on the bone there. And I think that's a perfect transition to move from the North Carolina A&T relay and kind of preview what will come and focus on what is the now. And we're looking at Howard's 4x1 relay. I don't think it should come as any surprise that Howard is the school that sent all of the HBCU women track and field athletes to Eugene. I don't think that should be shocking, especially when you look at the recent history. Howard knows how to produce really strong track and field teams, and is specifically on the relay side. Over the last 3 years, the 4x4 has made it every single year until this year. And I guess this means that it's the 4x1's chance to really take advantage of that opportunity. You have on this team, you have Ayana Gray Williams, Mackenzie Robinson, Kailei Collins, and Tiffani Ray Pittman. I think Tiffani Ray Pittman is probably looking for a little bit of redemption, because the junior has had a really bad history with being on Howard relay teams in the NCAA portion of this whole thing, right? They go through, they're very successful. They're fast, she's fast. Like, this always happens. But you look at last year's 4x4 team, they got disqualified when they made it to nationals. So they didn't even get to finish the race. I'm sure that she's looking for a certain level of redemption. 2 years prior, so as a freshman, she was on the 4x1 team. And as a 4x1 athlete, they also got disqualified, but that was in prelims. I'm not trying to paint her as the proverbial black cat or anything. I'm saying that she's been in this opportunity or in this position a couple of times and never really got to fully grasp it. And I'm sure that she's looking, and this probably means more to her. She still has her senior season, but at the same time, nobody wants to have this monkey on their back of, dang, repeated DQs. So I think that this is going to mean a little bit more to her as somebody who's been here on repeated times, right? This is her 3rd year at Howard, and it's her 3rd year making it to the NCAA at least regional round, and her second year in a row making it to the nationals stage. So I'll have that. But then also focusing on this year, this is the time that they ran in the quarterfinals to go ahead and punch the ticket to Eugene. Howard's 4x1 ran a 43.55, which was their season best. It was good for the third in their heat. Seventh overall in the event, gave them an automatic qualifier to Eugene. And when you look at half of that team, of course, when you have a 4x1, I'm going to say the majority of times, I'm not going to give a number out or a probability out or anything like that. But a lot of times when you have a relay team that is qualified for a national or an NCAA level event, you're going to have a couple of athletes on that relay that are going to run individuals. And for that's Tiffani Ray Pittman and Kailei Collins. They both competed in the 100-meter individuals. Collins was able to make it to the quarterfinals, running a personal best in both, actually. So in both of her 100-meter races, she did run her personal best first off in the first round, and then she bested that in the second in that quarterfinals. But neither one of the women were able to make it into nationals in the 100-meter individuals. Howard actually has a little bit of history for you. Howard is the first HBCU women's 4x1 team to advance past the prelims since North Carolina A&T did it in 2021. And that was a special year. That was the Cambria Sturgis year where she won it all in the 100 and the 200. So that was a very special year. And let's see if that magic can kind of transition its way into Howard's 4x1 team. Now, as far as the individual go, you have Simone Watkins, and she's the only solo female competitor to make it into nationals from an HBCU. And we spoke about the history that Howard has as far as 400 meters and whether that was the 4x4 or having the individuals. So I look at Jessica Wright, who has really been holding this torch down in the 400-meter hurdles, or rather holding the torch up, I should say, and holding the school down. But she's been there for the last 3 years, for the last 2 years. Before that was somebody else who I can't remember. But this is the first year that Watkins has came into Howard, and she immediately continued that trend. She's a Texas Tech transfer, and I want to read some of her numbers that she rattled off, because I believe that the way that Watkins transitioned into the nationals, right? So Watkins' path to the nationals to me was just spectacular, to be honest. So in her first round matchup, she ran a 57.76. At that time, that was her personal best. In the quarterfinal, she ran a 55.92. So that's nearly a 2-second leap from first round to second round. And I think this is probably a prime example of when you have a certain people next to you sometimes can make you run fast. I don't know if that's a myth or not, but I've heard it. And I think that this could be an example of that. When you look at just her path, right? Because Simone Watkins, first year coming in from Texas Tech, and she's already continuing the trend of Howard Lady Bison having a 400-meter hurdler make it into the NCAA track and field nationals. And she did it by running her personal best 2 times over. See, when you say she ran a 57.76, it sounds like, and I say she ran a 55.92, you may think she had an off day. No, that 57.76 was actually her best time of the season. She just ran significantly better in the quarterfinals. And you look at it, she was 5th in her heat. She was 5th in her heat in the first round. She ended up being 5th overall in the quarterfinals. So it was just a complete switch that she just flipped. And it was one that was spectacular. It was one that was enjoyable to watch. And for me, it makes me extremely excited to see what she can do, because if I'm subscribing to the ideology that competition raised her performance, well, now that competition is going to raise even more. And we see that a lot of times where athletes come in and they run a certain time in the first round, in the quarterfinals, they run better. And I think it's just the moment, and it's people rising to the moment. So we'll see if she's able to rise to the moment and make it past semifinals and make it into the championship round. So as we push forward, though, speaking of championships, FAMU is hoping that Cheyenne McEvans is able to bring them a championship. The former Syracuse and former Buffalo women's basketball player has a very interesting collegiate history that I want to break down, as it kind of looks at what player are you going to get for the Rattlers as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the best place for all your small or last-minute ticket deals. I'm trying to go to this Vegas versus Dallas game on the 5th. right? The Aces are coming to town and they're playing in the AMA. So I'm trying to see if I can grab myself some tickets. So you already know I'm about to go to Gametime. I'm going to download the app. If you haven't had it already, I'm going through that process. Downloading the app, creating an account. And because I just created that account, I'm going to get $20 off my first purchase if I use the code Locked On College. So I'm going to save a little bit money, but I'm already going to the best priced place that I can go. And they're so confident that you won't find a cheaper price that if you are able to find a cheaper price in the same section in the same row, they'll give you 110% back on the difference. Priority deals, flash deals, zone deals. They have everything you could ask for, whether that's athletics, concerts, comedy shows, theater plays, anything in between. Go to the Gametime app and create an account today and go ahead and save $20 off your first purchase with the code Locked On College. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day, live sports network on YouTube. So go ahead and check out Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. FAMU's women's basketball team has just got a really interesting transfer in Cheyenne McEvans. The reason I'm very interested in McEvans is because I want to know what form of her are you getting. And that's not just productivity wise, because when you compare the two schools, she's been at the University of Buffalo, and she's also been at the University or Syracuse University. Is Syracuse University of Syracuse, or is it just Syracuse University? I don't know. I can't remember. But anyway, the point is she's been at Buffalo and she's been at Syracuse. Forget the whole university side. Y'all know it's colleges. She's been at those schools and she's been different players at both, right? So on a productivity level, how excited you are probably depends on which one you put more stock into. And I'm not sure if I can tell you which one to put it into, to be honest. I think there's a lot of caveats when it comes to her performance at Buffalo. Definitely a lot when it comes to Syracuse. It's not even fair. But then also she's had an injury history that really makes you question what kind of player are you getting? So let's look at this. FAMU is bringing in Cheyenne McEvans. What player are you getting? Are you getting a player at Buffalo who was an all-MAC freshman team player? Are you getting a player at Buffalo who was a double-digit points per game scorer? Or are you getting a player at Syracuse who was well below that? Are you getting a person at Syracuse who, hey, she didn't end with a lot of minutes? It's a different level of production in between both schools. But then I'm looking at Buffalo because she ended her second year in Buffalo with a season-ending injury. Her only year at Syracuse, she had a season-ending injury. That's back-to-back years that Cheyenne McEvans has ended the season with an injury, a long-term injury, and the one at Syracuse led to her missing the entire, what would have been her senior year. So it makes me wonder, productivity-wise, who am I getting? Health-wise, who am I getting? That's probably the bigger question, because I can explain some of the productivity. So now let's get to that, because health, I'll never know the question. I mean, I'll never know the answer to that. Like, we won't know until she gets onto the court, you know? But yeah, I think that there's some promise if you look at what happened in Buffalo. When you get to Syracuse, she just didn't play a lot. I think that there was a lot of issues with the time. Could have been competition level. She was at a mid-major, even though I think that Buffalo is a higher mid-major, but it is a mid-major. And then she went to a high major in Syracuse, an elite school, right? Like, so it's different. Now you're coming down to FAMU, which is considered, I believe, a low mid-major on the SWAC level. So I think that these things all play a part to where production is the thing that's subjective. Her health is her health. I don't know what it is. We will know what it is, but I'm assuming it's good enough for FAMU to want to take that opportunity. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they're willing to risk it. Who freaking knows? Who cares? We'll see in the fall, or in the winter, I should say. But when I look at what she did as a freshman, 34 steals as a freshman in 22 games, averaging 5 boards. Offensively, she's been efficient and effective. And I think that's my biggest question for her. My biggest question for McEvans is, who will you be offensively when you come to FAMU? Because I've seen her shoot over 40% at Buffalo. I've seen her shoot 31% from 3 as a freshman. She's been effective and efficient, but it's not a lot of godly numbers, though I will say she did put it together in her last 4 games. She had her in her last 4 games, she actually had 2 highest career point totals. So it just makes me wonder. It just makes me wonder, who will you be? Who will you be asked to be? Because the thing about her career is that she's always been tied to Deasia Fair. Now, if you're tapped in to women's basketball, that name probably holds a lot of weight to you. For me, I'm not entirely tapped in, but her name was familiar. I said, Deasia Fair. And I actually missed it while she was at Buffalo. So while she was at Buffalo, while McEvans was at Buffalo, Fair was at Buffalo. So now those 11.5 points per game look a little different because Deasia Fair is a walking bucket. And I think that kind of gets not misused, but overused, to be honest. I think that we hear that way too much. But with Fair, she's the epitome of it. She's the 3rd leading scorer all time in collegiate women's basketball. So I think walking bucket is a proper way to describe her, but at the same time, it's overused, so I don't like using it on people. But when she was at Buffalo, when McEvans was at Buffalo, Fair was also at Buffalo. So now when you have somebody who scores like Fair does, you're not going to be asked to score the ball that much. That's not going to be something that you really need to do too frequently. So the fact that you can give me a lot of steals, the fact that you can give me a solid amount of rebounds as a 5'9" guard, the fact that you can do that becomes more valuable because I know what else you can do. Now it leaves the question, what are you going to do offensively when you don't have Deasia Fair? And when she went to Syracuse, Deasia Fair was there too. Deasia Fair showed up at Buffalo a year before Cheyenne McEvans, and they left the same year, and they both went to Syracuse. I'm sure there was other reasons at play. I know there was other reasons at play. But I would love to know, what is Cheyenne McEvans' offensive game when she doesn't have Deasia Fair there? If you're looking at McEvans' first year, her freshman year, and she was an all-MAC freshman player, if you're looking at that, I believe that there's a lot of excitement that can be derived from it. You're hoping that she gets her mojo back. You're hoping that her health is good, because that's a legitimate question. Like I said, back-to-back seasons with season-ending injuries. It makes you wonder, who am I going to get? I'm very excited to know. I don't have the answers to it. No one will have the answers to it until we finally get to the game. But I'm very excited to finally get the answers to it. Y'all will see that about me. One thing I've noticed is I love questions. I love to ask the questions that I don't really have answers to. I don't know, maybe that's just something weird about me, but I enjoy that because now it gives me something interesting to look at. And if you haven't noticed, you'll notice in football season, especially for my everydayers, we'll have storylines. And a lot of those storylines will be questions that you will not know the answer to until the game is over. So let's push forward, because we have yet another HBCU gymnastics team. And I love it because I think it speaks to the success in what is the perceived sustainability of HBCU gymnastics as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We have another HBCU gymnastics team, and this time it'll be Wilberforce University, who is launching the 3rd HBCU gymnastics team, and not only in history, but it's also the 3rd gymnastics team that has been announced in the last 3 years. You had Fisk in 2022 announced they were going to have a team in 2023. Then you had Talladega College, who announced in 2023 that they would have a team in 2024. You'll see that Wilberforce moves a little bit differently. Wilberforce said, we're going to announce in 2024 that we're going to have a team in 2026. So that's 23, 24, 25, 26. Yeah. So that's the 3rd team in 4 years as far as actually starting to compete. And I'm sure that they're going to be on the NCAA level as well. You see all 3 of these schools are NAIA schools, but Fisk, competes on a D2 NCAA level. Talladega, same thing, D2 NCAA level. So I think that you'll probably see Wilberforce follow. And I love this because this speaks to the success. And I genuinely believe this is success driven. I genuinely believe you look at Talladega and what they've done over the last 2 years. You look at Fisk and what they've done over the last 2 years. You look at Talladega and what they've done over this previous year in their first year. I can't speak about HBCU gymnastics and not speak about the level or the newness that they're at, right? Because they're still in the infancy. And yes, to a certain degree, you might have the hot new thing aspect. I think that could play a part, but I genuinely believe if it is, it's a very minuscule part of this. A lot of people aren't going to want to just, oh, it's cool. No, like people are going and they're making it cool more so than it was just cool off the rip. I do believe that this was a match made in heaven. So I'm not overly surprised by the growth of the sport. I'm still waiting for some of our D1 HBCUs to take part in this. I think that it's only a matter of time. And the more NAIA schools that do this, the more you'll see D2 schools do it because they're competing on the D2 NCAA level. And I think that as it grows, it may just have to be a bottom to top type of deal where NAIA is the first one to lead that charge. And they get 3, 4, 5 schools who have a gymnastics program. And it's viable, and the HBCU community is buying in. See, one thing you'll notice, and we all know this, HBCUs are they're family. I ain't gonna say kind of family because families fight. So I wouldn't even say kind of. But I think that the support level kind of varies depending on the issue. At least that's what I've noticed a lot of times. And they'll see, and when I say they, I mean the schools, the D1 HBCUs, I think you'll see the support kind of nationwide for HBCU gymnastics from HBCU alums, whether that's a Morgan State person, shout out to them with a wrestling team, whether that's Morgan State, maybe that's a Grambling, maybe that's a Bowie State, maybe that's a Tuskegee. Like, I think you'll just see all of these alums support HBCU gymnastics, and sooner or later, you'll see more higher subdivision HBCUs decide to have a gymnastics program. But for right now, let's focus on the 3 that you have, because I don't have to project towards the future to smile. I don't have to project towards the future to be prideful in what HBCU gymnastics is, right? It's not about what it will be. It's about what it is. Talladega in their first year had somebody medal. Kirsten Johnson medaled. Now, y'all understand? Kirsten Johnson medaled at a national event. Fisk had a national champion, has a national champion, reigning, defending in Morgan Price. And I genuinely believe the pickup of Morgan Price is something that I haven't spoken about enough. And I think that her winning that national championship did so much for HBCU gymnastics. I could easily see that event being the reason that teams decide to form. I could genuinely see that. I'm not trying to use hyperbole. I'm not trying to exaggerate. I believe that Morgan Price winning a national championship could have that level of impact where it sparks whole teams, whole schools to do it, because you realize how successful that it can be when you realize that Morgan Price did this in year 2. And I love using her as a person to brag on. But one thing I probably will never do is use her as a comparison or you did or they did this so you could do this. That's not realistic. There's not many Morgan Prices who are walking around. There's not many high level recruits who are deciding that, yeah, I want to go to this HBCU because I've always wanted to do it. Look at it. The 2 I can think of right now, the 2 I can think of off the top of my head are Morgan Price, who always wanted to go to an HBCU, but it wasn't an option. So this is literally a lifelong dream for her. And then you have Travis Hunter, who, if Deion Sanders wasn't the coach, and not just Deion Sanders wasn't the coach, if Prime wasn't the coach and Prime wasn't his idol, that's not happening. That's not Prime being, like, you have to understand, Travis Hunter literally was going to go to Florida State because he wanted to be like Deion Sanders. Like, these are 2 very specific examples. So I would never say, oh, they got a Morgan Price, you can get one. No, I don't know what Kirsten Johnson's situation was coming out of high school, but I didn't hear about it spoken like that. I do believe you can get a Kirsten Johnson, and look at how successful she was as a freshman. As a freshman, stars coming out of high school is not everything. I was listening to a recruiting show about the best receiver in Louisiana, and how you can get the best receiver in Louisiana may not be maybe a 4-star instead of a 5-star, and they'll still have a very productive career. It's not about the stars, man. It looks good and it's something to brag about. But like I said, I don't know what Kirsten Johnson's star or her recruitment was coming out of high school, but look at what she did as a freshman. As a freshman, she was nearly the national champion. She was that close. It doesn't get spoken about enough, but she was literally on the precipice of standing on the top of the podium, and yet she still made it to third. Like, this was a phenomenal year. You can do that. I believe that you're looking at a 2-year ramp up because they haven't fully fleshed out the idea. It's probably still pretty new, the idea in general. They just decided they wanted to do it with enough base level research that they could announce it. You look at Fisk, announced next year. Talladega, announced next year. This one, Wilberforce is going to announce, but then they're going to open up in 2 years, in 2026, for competition. And I'll read this because Black Girls Do Gymnastics is a company or an organization that really helps what it says, Black Girls Do Gymnastics. And they put out this statement along with Wilberforce. Let's read this verbatim as we close out the episode. As a part of this commitment, Black Girls Do Gymnastics and Wilberforce University will host Camp Isla, a gymnastic camp scheduled to take place on Wilberforce campus from June 20th to 23rd, 2024. For level 6 to 10 level 6 to 10 gymnasts who are ages 6 and up. Camp Isla aims to nurture aspiring gymnastics while fostering a supportive environment for skill development and camaraderie within the sport. Notably, the camp will play a crucial role in the formation of the inaugural team slated to compete in January 2026. I did not need to read all of that in hindsight. In hindsight, I could have surmised it, but basically, they're going to have a camp this year that is very important in forming the inaugural team. So I expect that the older, probably the teenagers who come in, you're instantly looking at them as recruits, and you're bringing it to your campus, and it's 2 years in the future. So you can already begin multiple recruiting classes and put your eyes on multiple athletes. This is going to be very interesting. I do not believe that this is the last one, maybe the last one we see this year, but I believe that you'll see 5 very soon. I think you'll see 5 very, very soon. And, speaking of which, I'll be back tomorrow for the 5th episode of the week. No, it's not, because I took Tuesday off. Oh, well. Anyway, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. I probably could have rolled with it and you wouldn't even have known nothing, but it's all right. I believe in telling y'all the truth. So until the next time that we hear each other, family, remember, I always tell you guys the truth. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.